All right, so we're diving into the future of banking today. You sent over some really interesting articles, one from FIS Global, and then this other one about banking innovations. I'm feeling this deep dive already.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. It's really a complete paradigm shift in how we think about and interact with money.
And it's happening right now, right under our noses. Think about it. When was the last time you actually used cash? I feel like I haven't used bills in ages.
You're not alone. FIS Global is saying globally cash is really on the decline. They're even predicting it could drop to just 10% of transactions by 2026.
Wow.
Yeah, and digital wallets are taking over at 32%, with credit and debit cards right behind.
So cash is on its way out. Got it. But what's filling that void? Are we all just going to be swiping plastic forever?
Not necessarily. This is where things get really interesting with Central Bank Digital Currencies, or CBDCs.
CBDCs.
Yeah.
Okay, I've heard of those.
Yeah.
But how would they actually work?
So imagine digital cash issued directly by the central bank, cutting out the middleman.
So instead of having an account with like Chase or Wells Fargo, we'd all have accounts with the Federal Reserve.
Yeah, that's the general idea.
Wow.
It could really revolutionize things, make transactions faster, more efficient, potentially even more accessible.
Okay, so more people would have access to banking.
Exactly. Think about microloans, reaching communities that traditional banks don't serve.
That's amazing. But hold on a second. Wouldn't this give the government even more control over our money? I mean, they could track every transaction.
That's definitely one of the big concerns. With CBDCs, privacy is a huge issue. One proposed solution is to have varying levels of privacy, depending on the amount of the transaction.
So like buying a coffee might be anonymous,
Yeah.
but if you're transferring like thousands of dollars, there'd be more scrutiny.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay, I'm starting to see the potential, but also the potential downsides. But what about the banks themselves? Are we heading towards a world without traditional banks?
Well, it's certainly a disruptive force that they're going to have to adapt to if people start holding digital currency directly with the central bank. It could lead to a big shift in deposits away from commercial banks.
That would be a huge deal, but I have a feeling the banks aren't just going to sit back and watch this happen.
Absolutely not. They're investing a ton of money in new technologies to stay competitive. That second article you sent highlights some pretty fascinating innovations.
Oh, yeah. It's like they're building a whole tech arsenal to revolutionize the industry. There's generative AI, think ChatGPT, but for finance.
Right.
Imagine your banking app giving you personalized investment advice, or even like warning you about potential savings.
It's like having a 247 financial advisor in your pocket.
That's pretty cool. Then there's the Metaverse, banking in the Metaverse.
Now, that's a wild concept.
What would that even look like?
Imagine attending a virtual financial seminar from your couch, or visualizing your portfolio in a 3D environment.
Whoa. Okay, that is next level. What about something a little less
Yeah.
out there? What was that thing called? Embedded finance?
Ah, yes. That's about integrating banking seamlessly into our everyday lives.
Give me an example.
Let's say you're buying concert tickets online. And right there on the ticket website, you get instant loan options tailored to that purchase.
So you don't have to go through a whole separate process.
Exactly. It just makes things so much easier.
That's really smart. Okay, and then there's biometrics, no more passwords.
Oh, thank
finally.
y'all are ready for that.
Biometrics could make banking incredibly secure and easy to use. Just use your fingerprint or face scan.
Oh, that's what I'm talking about. And lastly, we have cloud computing. What's the role of cloud computing in all this?
It's all about giving banks the power to handle massive amounts of data in real time.
So faster transactions, better fraud detection.
Exactly. And potentially even more personalized services.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground. It's clear that the banking industry is changing fast.
It's an exciting time to be following all this.
But before we get too lost in all the tech, let's bring it back to you, our listener. What does all of this actually mean for your financial future? That's the question we'll dive into after the break.
So we've talked about all these big changes, but how do they actually translate into real changes for like the average person?
That article you sent, it actually outlines 10 key steps that banks are taking to adapt to this digital transformation.
Okay, 10 steps. Let's hear them.
Yeah, step 1. It all starts with fully embracing digital transformation. It's not just about implementing the tech. It's about a fundamental shift in mindset.
So it has to be like baked into the bank's DNA, not just like an afterthought.
Exactly. Step 2 is all about Cultivating a culture of innovation.
So like encouraging creativity and experimentation.
Right, and fostering collaboration, both internally and externally.
So they need to be coming up with new ideas
Mhm.
and partnering with others to make them happen.
Exactly. Step 3 is putting the customer at the center of everything.
So focusing on user experience.
Yes. Really understanding the customer's needs.
Makes sense. If the banking apps are confusing, people are going to go elsewhere.
It's all about making banking intuitive and engaging.
Like the best apps on our phones. They just work.
Exactly. And that brings us to step 4. Personalization.
Personalization. That seems to be the buzzword everywhere.
It is, and it's especially powerful in banking.
So how would that work?
Imagine your banking app, analyzing your spending habits, and then giving you advice to help you reach your financial goals.
So it's like a personal financial advisor.
In a way, step 5 is about seamless integration.
So making sure all these new technologies
Yeah.
work together smoothly.
Right. We don't want a Frankenstein's monster of tech.
That'd be a nightmare.
Exactly. Step 6, data-driven customer insights.
So using data to really understand how customers are using their products and services.
Yes. And then using that data to improve the experience.
And even anticipate customer needs.
Exactly. Step 7 is about security and privacy.
Which is super important, especially with all this new tech and data.
Absolutely. Banks are investing heavily in cybersecurity to protect customer information.
That's good to hear. What's step 8?
Empowering customers
How do they do that?
by educating them about how to use all this new technology.
So people don't feel left behind.
Exactly. Step 9, recognizing that innovation is an ongoing process.
So constantly improving and adapting.
Right. Never settling for the status quo.
And finally, step 10.
Collaboration and co-creation.
What does that mean?
It means involving customers directly in the development process.
So like getting feedback from actual users.
Exactly. It's the best way to create products and services that truly meet customer needs.
Those 10 steps really paint a picture of how banks are adapting to the digital age.
It's a really interesting evolution to watch.
But let's shift gears for a moment and bring it back to you, the listener. What does all of this actually mean for your day-to-day financial life?
Let's talk about that.
So we've talked about cash disappearing and digital currencies run by central banks and banks using all this new tech. But what does it all actually mean for you, the listener? Like, how will this change how you manage your money?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that we're moving away from physical cash and towards a more digital financial system.
Right, with digital wallets and maybe even those CBDCs.
Exactly.
And on top of that, we've got all these other innovations like AI and the Metaverse and embedded finance.
It can feel like a lot to keep up with.
It really can.
But ultimately, all of these changes are designed to make banking easier, more personalized, and more secure.
So less of a chore and more like something that actually helps us.
Exactly. Imagine a world where your bank knows what you need before you even do, where managing your money is as easy as sending a text message.
That sounds pretty futuristic.
It does, but it's not as far off as you might think.
So what advice would you give to our listener about how to navigate all of this?
I think the most important thing is to stay curious and informed. Keep learning about these new technologies, and don't be afraid to try them out.
We're all kind of figuring this out together, right?
We are, and remember, this is an ongoing process. The future of banking isn't set in stone.
So we need to stay flexible and adapt as things change.
Exactly.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into the future of banking.
It has.
We've covered so much ground, from the decline of cash to the rise of new technologies and what it all means for the average person.
It's been a great discussion.
A huge thank you to you for sharing your expertise with us.
My pleasure.
And of course, a huge thank you to you, our listener, for joining us on this journey.
Until next time, keep exploring and keep diving deep.